Hey guys, tonight we're heading out on a dusty, slightly funky smelling journey along the Silk Road to investigate, of all things, pickled lettuce. Yes, really, not silk, not gold, not precious gemstones or legendary scrolls. Nope, just a mildly crunchy, slightly sour, questionably intentional vegetable that somehow made its way across deserts, mountains, and empires, leaving confusion in its wake for centuries. And tonight, you're the lucky person assigned to deliver it. Not as a powerful diplomat, not as a famous merchant. You're just the newest guy in the caravan. The welcome to the team gift, a clay jar of fermented mystery, strapped to the back of your camel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your city and the current time. I love seeing where you all are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes open before sunrise. The sky is still a pale ink blot of night, and the air smells like camel sweat, old bread, and last night's half-burned lentils. Somewhere near the campfire, someone's trying to toast breakfast. You can tell it's not going well by the sound it makes. Foo, that's either a failed flame or someone just passed gas. Your job today is court a jar of pickled lettuce across the desert, from the edges of low lawn all the way west to Samarkand. Estimated travel time, 3 months. Estimated travel companions, 1 grumpy camel, 2 chatty spice traders, and a sealed jar of something. You lean in and sniff it. Oh no. To this day, historians still argue whether this thing was considered food. Some believe it was used as a cooling tonic for fevers. Others insist it was medicinal, or even just a packing mistake no one had the guts to admit. And then there are the scholars, who've given up entirely, and just call it ambiguous vegetation. But none of that matters to you, because no one knows who stamped it with an official seal. And now it's your problem. You glance at one of the older traders and whisper, "Do we know why we're carrying this?" He shrugs. Maybe it's a tax thing. You try to lift the jar. It's heavier than you expected. Thick ropes wrap around it like someone tried to contain a demon inside. You start to wonder, if this breaks open in the heat, does it count as chemical warfare? Your first real test is scurrying the edge of the Taklamakan desert. The wind blows sideways, full of grit and complaint. The jar rattles behind you like it's got something to say. You start to believe, just a little bit, that maybe it is alive in there. There are no rest stops. Once your caravan gets lost for 3 days, you start using the smell of the jar as your compass. When the breeze picks up and you catch a whiff of fermented funk, you know you're still heading west. Of course, there are stranger moments. In a small outpost called Yongwon, you meet an old man who swears he once ate this exact kind of pickle. You're skeptical. He has no teeth. He says that only makes the experience more spiritual. You offer him a tiny sample. He tastes it. There's a long silence. Then he says, is still terrible. You start to realize the Silk Road isn't just a place for goods to travel. It's a place where misunderstandings become tradition. Somewhere in history, someone probably just pickled something they weren't supposed to and forgot to label it. Now it's a treasured import. And here you are, hauling it across rivers, dunes, mountains, and cultural misinterpretations, all because some imperial clerk once thought, sure, let's write this down as essential goods. At night, you lie back under the desert stars. The jar sits beside you like a warm, slightly offended pet. You give it a pat. It sloshes ominously. The journey has only just begun. You wake up with a stiff neck and a suspicious wet patch near your bedroll. The pickled lettuce jar has leaked slightly. It now smells sharper, like someone tried to pickle a cabbage and accidentally invented a weaponized vinegar bomb. You tighten the ropes and mutter an apology to the camel, who clearly blames you for everything. The day begins with the usual rhythm of a Silk Road caravan: groans, grumbles, dust, and the occasional sound of someone stepping in something unfortunate. Your route takes you west, through dry riverbeds and narrow mountain passes. Following the winding edge of the Kwanloan Mountains, you quickly discover something vital. Pickled lettuce does not travel well. Every time the jar shifts, you worry, what if it breaks? What if it cracks? What if, heaven forbid, it opens? You start treating the thing like a living creature. You check on it like it's a fussy baby. You hum lullabies. You'd even pad the saddle with your spare cloak. It smells like pickled regret now. One of the merchant's jokes, I've seen people guard relics of the Buddha with less anxiety. You don't laugh. Along the way, you trade for supplies at a caravanserai near Miran. It's a lively place, half inn, half market, half gossip club. Yes, that's three halves. Welcome to the Silk Road, where math is flexible and rumors are currency. You overhear one trader bragging about carrying medicinal rhubarb, while another insists his stash of dried apricots cured a local prince's stomach issues. Then someone says, well, at least none of us are hauling the fermented nightmare. Everyone turns to look at you. You wave, aye. They nod respectfully, and then immediately take one large step back. This is your life now, the pickle guy. And you're not even sure what's in the jar anymore. The outer label has faded, some letters smudged beyond recognition. What's left looks like a mix of Chinese, Scythian, and possibly the word caution in some ancient script. Scholars today still argue about it. Some think it was a food warning. Others believe it meant valuable, while a few French academics suggest it just said do not shake. Too late. Back on the road, you notice something strange. Whenever you pass a new town or outpost, someone always recognizes the jar. Not you, not your camel, that jar. A cook in Coben says his grandmother used to bury similar jars underground for a full year, then use the result to flavor mutton. A soldier at a checkpoint points and exclaims, is that the legendary Sour King's gift? You don't have the heart to say it's probably just pickled lettuce. The weirdest moment comes when an old woman in a village offers to buy it. She says, my ancestors used to trade fermented greens for silk. That one looks important. You ask, do you want to taste it? She sniffs once. No. Still, she offers a small carved bracelet in exchange. You decline. You're not allowed to trade it. It's on your manifest as priority cargo. You're starting to wonder, was this all a prank? Did someone in the imperial office write this down just to see if someone would actually do it? It's not impossible. Bureaucrats get bored too. There's even a theorist hotly debated among historians that some Silk Road goods weren't meant to arrive. They were meant to circulate. Just move. Keep moving. The act of transportation was the point. A form of tax dodge, or a test of loyalty, or maybe just an elaborate game of hot potato with fermented vegetables. At night, you sit by the fire, holding your cup of tea and watching the jar resting nearby. The stars above are quiet. The wind is soft. The pickle gurgles ominously. You sigh. Somewhere out there, someone actually ordered this thing, and you're going to deliver it, even if it makes no sense. Because that's your job. You're halfway to doing one when you realize something slightly horrifying. The jar is swelling. Not dramatically, no bulging lid or urgent bubbling, but it's heavier, warmer, and if you hold it close enough, which you try not to, you can hear it, a soft fizzing sound, like it's thinking, plotting. You bring this up to the caravan leader during a rest stop. He squints at the jar, pokes it with a stick, then shrugs. Fermentation, he says, or possibly a small demon. You hope he's joking. He doesn't clarify. As the sun sets and your group sets up camp near a dried-up creek, you catch a whiff of something extra vinegary. The wind shifts. You're not alone. Others smell it too. Who spilled the wine? Someone calls out. No one answers. All eyes slowly drift to your jar. A young apprentice trader mumbles, I thought pickles were supposed to be inside something. They are, you say. He nods. Then why does it smell like they're trying to escape? Good question. By morning, things calm down. The air is cool. The jar is quiet. And you start to wonder if it was all in your head until you reach the checkpoint. Duanwon is a bustling outpost, filled with murals, monks, merchants, and mysteries. You stopped at the gates like everyone else. Cargo inspected, camels counted, paperwork stamped with that satisfying thump of bureaucracy. Then the inspector gets to you. He points to the jar. Open it. You hesitate. Are you sure? He insists. You unwrap the ropes. Lift the lid just a little. A soft hiss. A vinegary sigh escapes. Everyone takes one step back. The inspector narrows his eyes. He peers inside, frowns, and then says the most confusing thing yet. Imperial grade type B. You blink. Sorry. Type B of what? He waves you through. You're fine. Just don't feed it to horses. You weren't planning to. Later, at that caravanserai, you share this story with an old scholar traveling west. He's been mapping Silk Road folklore, and he chuckles as he writes down your description. You know, he says, there are records of different types of pickled lettuce in Tang Dynasty shipping logs, some for eating, some for ritual use, and at least one marked as do not unseal under full moon. You ask what that means. He shrugs. Still a mystery. The archives were damn great. You decide to ask around. Apparently, Imperial grade type B was, depending on whom you ask, a medicinal tonic for tired eyes, a sacrificial offering to mountain spirits, a failed attempt at portable soup, or simply the one that didn't explode. No one really agrees. Some say the distinction between grade A and B was purely political loan for court use, one for trading partners you weren't that fond of. Even modern historians argue over it. Was there actually a classification system, or is this just an ancient version of someone labeling things extra premium so they could charge more? As you ponder this, you realize something important. The Silk Road wasn't just about silk, or gold, or even knowledge. It was about misunderstanding refined into tradition. One trader told you that in Bactria, people used to smear pickled lettuce paste on camel wounds. Another swore it made a great facial scrub. A monk once told you he saw it being offered at a desert shrine during a sandstorm. As a gift to the wind, you stare at your jar. It burps softly. The sun sets behind the cliffs of Duanwang. Shadows stretch across the sand. You settle down, wrap the jar tight, and whisper, "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" It doesn't answer, but you're pretty sure the answer is yes. You cross the gates of Duanwang with a stamped scroll, a mildly traumatic pickling experience, and an increasing suspicion that your cargo might be more famous than you are. You're not imagining it. People point. One boy runs up just to ask, "Is that the jar?" You say yes, and he sprints away screaming. It exists. No context, just excitement and dust. A street vendor even offers to trade you 3 bowls of hot noodles and a camel bell in exchange for a look inside. You decline up politely but wonder if you should have taken the noodles. The journey west continues, and the terrain changes. You move from dry deserts into greener, hillier land. The air is cooler here, but the jar remains warm, constant, loyal, slightly too fragrant. Your caravan picks up new travelers, a Roman merchant with a suspiciously clean toga, a Buddhist monk who never stops humming, and a horse named Turnip who looks like he's seen things. You ask the monk if he's ever heard of pickled lettuce being used in spiritual practice. He nods sagely and says, "Some say it teaches patience." You're not sure if he's joking. Honestly, at this point, the jar has become a kind of meditation, a test of endurance, of nasal tolerance. One night, as you camp near the base of the Chilean mountains, someone starts a story circled by the fire. A trader shares a tale about how a jar like yours once healed a poisoned prince. Another swears it was used in a wedding ceremony to symbolize sour times sweetened by journey. A third simply says, "My aunt one Saturday on one by mistake, she never walked the same." Then it's your turn. They look at you. You shrug. It leaks sometimes. There's a respectful silence. Even in this quiet humor, something starts to click. The jar has become more than just food. It's part of a story, like the kind of relic people pass down, not because it's useful, but because no one really wants to be the last one holding it. A few days later, you stop in a small village where an elderly healer offers to examine the contents. She opens the lid, sniffs once, nods, then mutters, definitely not type A. What's the difference? You asked. Well, she says, type A doesn't smell like heartbreak and boiled socks. You pause, and type C. She squints. We don't talk about type C. She offers you a cup of herbal tea and tells you what little she knows. In ancient times, pickling wasn't just for preservation, it was for experimentation. Traveling food scientists, yes, that was a thing, tried fermenting everything. Lettuce was just one particularly persistent example. Some scholars believe the recipe came from a lost Central Asian cookbook now known only by name. The leaf that waited too long. Others think it was originally a failed soup concentrate that people were too polite to throw away. The truth, of course, remains elusive, but that's the charm of it. Along the Silk Road, things don't always make sense if they just are. A jar becomes a legend, a smell becomes a memory, a delivery becomes a life lesson in humility. At the edge of the village, as you prepare to leave, the healer presses something into your hand, a small cloth, sachet filled with dried herbs. Put this near the jar, she says, not for the smell, for your sanity. You thank her, tie it gently to the lid, and for the first time in days, the air around you smells slightly less aggressive. That night, under a sky full of stars, you fall asleep to the sound of wind in the trees, the crackle of firewood, and the occasional quiet bloop from the jar. You don't even flinch anymore. You're halfway through your journey when the jar gets its first official compliment. It happens in a bustling market town outside Turpan. A withered old trader will claims to have once dined with a Kushan prince in for a sniff, pauses thoughtfully, and says, "Ah yes, that's a bold bouquet. Notes of mustard, despair, and possibly apricot." You nod solemnly. It's Imperial Grade Type B. He gasps, clutches his beard, and bows to the jar, not to you. It's fine. You're used to it by now. By this point, you've given up trying to explain what it actually is. It's easier to just smile mysteriously. Let people assume it's sacred, or powerful, or haunted, all of which, honestly, might be true. The terrain around you flattens out into vineyards and cotton fields, the dust giving way to greenery. The air smells sweeter, but the jar still holds its own. It's like traveling with someone who refuses to change clothes, ever. As you ride, you think back to something one of your fellow travelers said a few days ago. You don't carry the jar carries you. Poetic, disturbing, maybe a little true. Because here's the weird part. The longer you travel, the less ridiculous it feels. There's a rhythm to it. Every night you check on it. Every morning you repack it. You've developed a system for keeping it upright, shaded, cushioned with extra cloth. You even whisper to it occasionally. When no one's looking, you don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the route, the jar became part of your identity. You're not just a trader, you're the guy with that jar. Imon Village? Someone draws a little sketch of you and the jar in charcoal on a wall. You look heroic. The jar has a halo. The most surreal moment comes at a checkpoint, where a government official asks to see your cargo list. You hand him the scroll. He frowns. Pickled. Lettuce. You brace for confusion, maybe even confiscation. Instead, he lights up. My grandmother used to make that. You blink. Seriously. Oh yes. He says, Butters was type A. It made your tongue go numb and your dreams extra vivid. You ask what type B does. He shrugs. We don't know. No one's eaten it in centuries. According to a few historical whispers, some buried in marginalia. Others passed around like gossip at a scholar's tea. Type B might have been developed during a border crisis. Supposedly it was created as a long-lasting field ration for soldiers. Others argue it was purely ceremonial, offered to foreign dignitaries as a polite insult. One theory suggests it was a diplomatic gift trap. If your guest ate it, they were considered very brave. If they refused, well, that told you everything you needed to know. Historians still argue, was it food, a joke, a weaponized vegetable? Meanwhile, in your world, it's just there, day in, day out, wobbling slightly, gurgling faintly, smelling stronger than it did yesterday. You've started dreaming about it. You're not proud of this, but once you dreamed the jar rolled down a sand dune, sprouted legs, and demanded tribute from the camel. Your dreams are getting weird, and your relationship with the jar is getting personal. So when a small-time noble in the next town offers you a handful of coins and a small box of cinnamon to take it off your hands, you decline, not because the offer's bad, but because you can't imagine not finishing this journey. You tell them, it's not just a jar, it's history, it's commitment, it's very stubborn lettuce. He nods respectfully. Fair. That night, you set up camp beside a slow-moving river. The stars shimmer above. You heat up a small bowl of broth. The jar sits beside you. As always, you raise your cup and toast it quietly. To confusion, you say, it burbles back. You enter the next stretch of your journey with a surprising new reputation. You're no longer the guy with the weird jar. You're now the pickled courier. It's not a promotion you applied for, but every outpost seems to know you now. Or at least, they recognize the jar. It precedes you like a royal herald and aromatic vinegary herald with ambiguous intent. In a dusty roadside village, a child runs up to you yelling, "It's the pickle man!" You wave, the child waves back, then promptly runs away gagging. Your fame has become complicated. Still, you're getting better at this. You figured out how to balance the jar during river crossings. You've learned which types of camel saddles minimize sloshing. You've even stopped flinching every time it gurgles. One of your fellow travelers, a chatty silk merchant from Luoyang, asks if you've considered giving the jar a name. You haven't, but now that he's said it, you kind of want to. You consider a few options. General Latticeus, Sir Pickle-a-Lot, the jar that waits. Ultimately, you settle on just boss, because let's be honest, it's clearly in charge now. The road turns rockier as you ascend into the lower hills of Central Asia. You pass through narrow valleys, ancient orchards, and shrines built into cliffs. At one rest stop, a traveling bard composes a short psalm about you and boss. It's not very good, but it rhymes fermentation with divine revelation, and that counts for something. Meanwhile, the jar remains as mysterious as ever. In a hilltop monastery, a monk squints at it for a full minute before saying, this is one of the lost five. When you ask what that means, he just smiles and walks away, trailing incense and riddles. Another village elder offers a different take. He believes jars like yours were once used in oath ceremonial pickles, consumed to seal contracts and curses alike. He insists his cousin once ate one and woke up speaking fluent Tocharian. You smile politely and don't ask for details. By now, you've gathered at least 12 conflicting origin stories for this thing. 1. Royal ration. 2. Military prank. 3. Failed medicinal tonic. 4. Gift from a slightly confused emperor. 5. Leftovers from a wedding that never happened. 6. Secret trade code. 7. Attempted soup. 8. Dry tea mistake. 9. Weather offering. 10. Pickled rebellion. 11. Divine joke. 12. High-end horse repellent. Scholars still debate it. Obviously, some say the truth is buried in a lost library beneath what's now a dried-up lake. Others argue the ambiguity was intentional, that the Silk Road didn't just trade objects, it traded stories, and that jar was a walking rumor. And here you are, carrying it forward. One afternoon, as you walk alone along a narrow path lined with wind-worn statues, something changes. You stop hearing it. No gurgling, no bloop, no faintness of fermentation. You panic. Of course, you check the seal. You nudge it gently. Nothing. For a few minutes, you honestly think it might have expired. But just as you consider pulling off the lid, it lets out a single, slow blorp. You exhale. Don't do that to me, boss. From that point on, you start talking to the jar more often. It's not weird, not really. Other people talk to their horses, or their shoes, or the stars. You talk to your pickled traveling companion. It doesn't judge you, probably. At the next camp, you dream you're presenting the jar to a grand hall of dignitaries. One of them opens it and proclaims, "At last, the missing ingredient for peace." Then someone sneezes, and you wake up. In the real world, Oz is still there, quiet, strange, eternal. You tighten the ropes, stretch your back, and continue west. The journey goes on. You wait to rain for the first time in weeks. It's not dramatic, just a light drizzle that smells of wet earth and distant mulberries. Your tent flaps gently in the wind. Boss Jarus, naturally, bone dry. Somehow its cloth wrappings repel water, like it's made of duck feathers and smugness. You pull on your damp boots, groaning as you step outside. The road is turning to mud, and the wheels of the caravan carts are already starting to sink. Today's stretch will be slow. The mud makes everything feel heavier. Your clothes, your boots, your mood. Even the jar seems to sense the change. It's unusually quiet. Maybe it doesn't like the humidity, or maybe it's brooding. You wouldn't be surprised. You've started suspecting it as moods. The landscape changes too. More greenery, more trees, more birds with opinions. You're officially out of the desert zones and into the woodlands, near the borderlands of ancient Sogdia. Here, food is different, spicier, tangier. People start offering you dishes made with fermented roots and aged sheep cheese. You politely decline and gesture to boss. Already got my daily portion of funk. A local elder overhears you and laughs. He insists on tasting it. You panic. He's serious. He's got a spoon. A crowd gathers. You hesitate. Then slowly, carefully, break the seal just a crack. Everyone leans in. There's like a tired dragon exhaling in a smell that's part vinegar, part moss, part moral dilemma. The elder leans closer, sniffs deeply, and goes quiet. You brace yourself. Finally, he says, "That reminds me of my cousin's wedding. We don't talk about it." He walks away. No one else asks to try it. The road continues through lush farmland, wooding streams, and villages that seem to bloom straight out of the mud. You hear stories in each one. One woman swears her grandmother used to rub pickled lettuce on her forehead to stop dreams from becoming too exciting. Another claims it keeps fox spirits away. A traveling juggler offers to trade you his juggling knives for a single whiff of what's inside. You politely decline. Oz does not belong in a sideshow. Despite the smell and the constant confusion, you're starting to see something special in all this. This thing you carry, it's like a thread running through the map, a reminder of how weirdly connected everyone is. No matter where you go, someone has heard of something like it. Different names, different legends, but always something. Historians today often refer to this phenomenon as convergent preservation, a fancy way of saying humanity keeps remembering the same thing in slightly different brown ways. And yet, somehow, it endures. You think about this as you cross a flooded wooden bridge, with boss strapped to your back like a very judgmental turtle shell. The river beneath you churns. The bridge creaks. Your camel gives you a look that says, "If we die, I blame the jar," but you make it across. On the other side, a group of children are selling tiny clay jars as toys. One looks suspiciously like yours. You buy one. Boss doesn't seem jealous. That night, under a makeshift awning, you sit by the fire holding both jars, big, sour original and the tiny souvenir copy. You set them side by side. "See," you say, "you're inspiring art now." Oz does not respond, but you swear it gurgles a little more proudly than usual. You're less than a month from your final destination when things start to get weird. Like, extra weird, even for a man who's been traveling with a mildly radioactive lettuce jar. It begins in a dusty old town near the Zerevshin Valley. You've just finished tying up the camel and setting down your gear when a messenger, an actual, professional, scroll-carrying, velvet-hat-wearing messenger shows up at your tin flap. Are you? He reads dramatically, the custodian of the object of sour provenance. You blink. Yes. He nods solemnly and hands you a scroll. It's written in 3 languages, 4 dialects, and features what may or may not be a pickle stamp. You scan the text. Apparently, someone, possibly a minor noble, possibly a philosopher, possibly a confused tax clerk, has requested an audience with the jar. You read it again, just to be sure. Not with you, with the jar. Later that afternoon, you and boss are escorted to a shaded pavilion on the edge of town. There, sitting on a folding stool, is a man wearing at least 7 layers of embroidered silk, and the expression of someone who's been waiting all week for this. He doesn't greet you. He bows deeply to the jar. Then he begins a monologue. He thanks it for its silent endurance. He apologizes on behalf of humanity for the great misunderstanding. He offers it a bowl of sugared almonds, which he places gently in front of it, as if it might reach out and take one. You just stand there, witnessing this. After a long silence, the man declares, "It has accepted the offering." He looks at you with tears in his eyes. You must continue. Pickled one. You nod. What else can you do? Once you're back on the road, you begin to notice more signs. People wave as you pass. Some make odd hand gestures, possibly religious, possibly digestive. At one stop, someone has drawn a small shrine to a jar with rays of light shooting out of it. It's boss. You realize, with dawning horror, that your cargo might have followers. Scholars today remain divided on this period. Some refer to it as the cult of the preserved. Others believe it was more of a social meme than an actual movement like ancient viral marketing. There's even a theory that certain jars were intentionally circulated not for trade, but for influence. You weren't just spreading goods, you were spreading ideas wrapped in brine and mystery. It's not entirely far-fetched. After all, humans assign meaning to things all the time. A flower becomes a symbol, a garment becomes sacred, a jar of pickled lettuce becomes something more. You start journaling about it. You make sketches of boss in different poses. Heroic, contemplative, slightly bloated. It helps pass the time. It also makes you feel slightly less like you're losing your mind. Your caravan is smaller now just for camels, 2 tired guards, and 1 extremely alert chicken. Long story. But the journey has become more peaceful. The roads are smoother. The weather's kinder. And yet, you find yourself almost missing the chaos, the confusion, the constant need to explain yourself to monks, border guards, and suspicious goats. The jar, for all its weirdness, has given your journey a kind of clarity, a purpose. You started out just doing your job. Now you're carrying meaning, given if the meaning is fermented and thickly vinegary. One evening, as you're setting up camp beneath a wind-sculpted cliff, you meet a young traveler headed east. He's bright-eyed, fresh-faced, and carrying what appears to be a jar. You ask what's in it. He grins. Pickled radish, I think. You nod. Be careful. That's how it starts. He laughs, waves goodbye, and disappears into the twilight. You sit back down, glance at boss, and say, "See, you've started something." Boss does not reply, but it wobbles slightly, as if in approval. You arrive at the outskirts of Samarkand and realize somewhat anticlimactically that no one is quite expecting you. Or rather, they're expecting something. Caravans arrive here daily, and yours is just one among down scenes. Colorful fabrics, glass beads, dried apricots, squirrels, horses, even a monkey wearing a tiny hat rolling through the gates. Nobody stops to check for one humble jar of mystery vegetables. You stand awkwardly in the square, us resting beside you like a sleepy, ascetic boer. This was supposed to be the grand finale. Trumpets, applause, perhaps a nobleman saying, "Ah yes, our prize fermented greens." But there's just dust, hawkers yelling about dried melons, and a goat nibbling your sandal. Eventually, a customs clerk with ink-stained fingers and a crooked hat waves you over. You explain your delivery. He squints at your manifest, then scratches his beard. Pickled? What? Lettuce. You say, Imperial Grade Type B. He flips through a stack of scrolls, finds nothing, shrugs, probably someone's idea of a joke. He stamps your paper anyway and hands it back, like he's just cleared a shipment of mildly cursed turnips. And just like that you're done, sort of. No one's there to receive it. No formal welcome. No grand buyer. You start asking around. Most people shake their heads. A few laugh. One young scribe offers a theory. The recipient may have died, been reassigned, or changed their mind several kingdoms ago. Classic Silk Road problem. Messages traveled slower than fermentation. You sit down on a low stone wall, the jar by your feet, and let it sink in. After months of desert, frost, wild stories, and half-believed myths, you've arrived. And now, nothing. Historians call this the delivery paradox, when trade goods outlast their own purpose. Some estimate that as much as 20% of long-distance Silk Road cargo arrived with no known recipient. Trade routes were messy, miscommunications common, and sometimes things were sent just to be sent. So what do you do now? You consider trying to sell it, but who buys something with no label, no clear purpose, and a smell strong enough to clear a small bazaar? You could bury it ceremonially, or donate it to a monastery, or crack it open and finally taste. It thought that last one feels like crossing a sacred line. Instead, you wonder, you and boss explore the markets, the gardens, the tiled courtyards echoing with the sound of song and water. You eat fresh bread with coriander. You see blue domes glistening in the sun. You talk to strangers about philosophy, astronomy, and the ideal spice to lamb ratio. And all the while, you carry the jar, not because you have to anymore, but because it feels like you're supposed to. One day, you pass a modest library and notice a dusty corner labeled unverified trade artifacts. A smiling old librarian waves you in. The shelves are filled with jars, tools, labeled rocks, and mystery boxes. You hesitate, then you ask, "Got room for one more?" She peers at boss, smiles wider, and gestures to an empty pedestal. You place it down gently. It sits there, noble, heavy, pungent. The librarian tags it. Unclaimed cargo, possibly important, definitely pickled. You stand there for a moment, a little proud, a little sad, then you walk away. You feel lighter. Later that evening, you sit under a tree by a fountain, cup of tea in hand. You watch the stars emerge one by one. There's no ticking clock now, no map to follow, just night and sky, and a story that will stay with you forever. You don't know what happens to the jar after that, but something tells you it's still there, waiting, fermenting, whispering softly to those who dare to wonder. You stay in Samarkand longer than planned, not because you're lost, or broke, or contractually obligated, but because something about this city pulls you in. It's the kind of place where time softens, where schedules melt into spices, and every alley smells like stories that didn't quite finish. You find work easily. Everyone needs something hauled, stitched, translated, or negotiated. You become that guy who once carried the pickled jar, which somehow earns you both curiosity and discounts. One morning, at the city's main caravanserai, a Persian trader approaches you. "I heard about the jar," he says. You nod. Of course he did. He smiles. "Did you know there's another one?" You pause mid-sip of tea. "Another jar." He leans in, lowers his voice like he's telling a state secret. "Mine's Type A." You nearly choke. He tells you his own story, how he found it in an abandoned storeroom near Kashgar, how he nearly threw it away before an old monk recognized the seal. He never opened it, claims the smell leaks through even waxcloth. You suggest a reunion, a jar summit, the first ever pickled accord. He laughs. "Too dangerous. What if they fuse?" You don't pursue the matter further. That night, you dream of a temple in the mountains, filled with jars on pedestals, each glowing softly, each humming faintly, a chorus of fermentation, rising like a hymn. You wake up confused, hungry, and slightly afraid of your own imagination. Historians today speculate that multiple types of preserved vegetables existed along the Silk Road, not just lettuce thought that seems to have had the strongest staying power, but also radishes, onions, lotus stems, and even pickled mushrooms packed in oil and cloves. Some were traded, some were gifted, some, apparently, were just left behind. The question remains, how did these items become so wrapped in mythology? Theories abound. Theory 1, they were genuinely valuable medicinal objects, misunderstood by future generations. Theory 2, they were cultural test gifts meant to confuse and amuse. Theory 3, they were simply long-lasting food for long-lasting travel, and people overthought it. But there's one fringe theory dismissed by most academics that you can't stop thinking about. It goes like this. Some objects gain meaning because they survive, not because of what they are, but because of what they endured. The longer something lasts, the more we assume it must have mattered. You sip your tea and consider that. Maybe Boss was never meant to be eaten. Maybe it wasn't even meant to arrive. Maybe it existed to be carried. And maybe you were supposed to be the one who carried it. One afternoon, as you stroll past the library, you peek through the window. Boss is still there, resting nobly on its pedestal. A group of students gathers around, arguing about its origins. One says it's a forgotten royal snack. Another insists it's the lost stomach cure of the cushion court. A third says it's just a jar of bad lunch. You smile. All of them might be right. None of them are wrong. Back at your little rented room near the spice market, you find an old scrap of paper tucked under your pack. It's a note, in careful script. If the object changes you, it was always more than just an object. No name, no signature. You stare at it for a long time. Then you fold it neatly and slip it into your travel journal. Maybe you'll carry that for a while now. Weeks pass. You've grown used to a life without the jar. Though not entirely. Every now and then, you swear you still catch a whiff of it on your coat. You reach for it instinctively in the mornings, only to remember it's resting on the dusty pedestal, stealing the attention of every passing student and curious traveler. One morning, a scholar knocks on your door. Young, nervous, ink-stained sleeves. He heard about you from the library. I'm writing a treatise, he says breathlessly, on Transuration fermentation symbolism. May I interview you? You blink twice. Sure. Over tea and stale walnuts. You tell him everything, well, almost everything. You leave out the part where you once threatened to throw the jar off a cliff during a sandstorm. That felt personal. He listens raptly, scribbling notes like his brush is on fire. As oh, when you first received the jar, he asks, what did you think it was? You shrug honestly. A practical joke, possibly a punishment. He nods solemnly, as if this were a sacred truth. The interview lasts 3 hours. He thanks you with a gift, a tiny clay medallion stamped with a character for preserve. You're not sure if it's literal or metaphorical, but you hang it near your bed anyway. That night, you dream the jar is giving a lecture. It wears tiny scholar's robes. You wake up deeply unsettled. Meanwhile, the legend grows. You start overhearing things, quiet stories drifting through the streets like spice smoke. A traveler from the west claims he saw a vision of the jar in a dream, leading him out of a snowstorm. A spice vendor insists her cousin's back pain went away after it stood near it for 10 minutes. A child says she left it a raisin and now her goat listens to her. You try to correct these tales at first. You explain it's just pickled lettuce. You recount the rough journey, the smells, the confusion, but people don't want the truth. They want mystery. And in a way, you get it. The Silk Road was never about precise definitions. It was about exchange of goods, yes, but also ideas, miscommunications, hopes, misunderstandings. A jar that no one really understands, perfect symbol. One afternoon, a delegation arrives from a small town along the Amudarya. They've heard about the vessel of endurance and request a viewing. The librarian obliges, lighting incense as if she is unveiling a holy relic. You happen to walk by as they're kneeling in front of it. You don't interrupt. Later, the librarian tells you she's added a plaque, donated by unknown courier, possibly a saint, possibly just tired. You laugh so hard you nearly drop your tea, but something lingers. That jar, silly as it seems, made you part of history, not the kind written in golden calligraphy, but the kind passed around campfires, misquoted, half-remembered, immortalized by accident. And isn't that what most of us are aiming for? Not to be famous, exactly, but to be woven in part of a larger, massier, wonderfully fermented human story. You visit boss again, just once. You lean in close and whisper, "You did good?" It doesn't answer, but the room smells faintly of old vinegar and calm. By now, you're a minor celebrity in the academic district. Not for your trade skills, or your dazzling conversation, though you've developed a pretty solid joke about camels and human, but for your proximity to the jar. Your name appears in 3 treatises, 2 lecture notes, and strangely a poem comparing you to a mango tree that bore no fruit but sheltered the sour. You're still not sure if that's a compliment. One evening, while sipping lentil soup in your usual corner of the tavern, a man slides into the seat across from you. Tall, gray-bearded, eyes like he's seen one too many sandstorms. He introduces himself simply. "I study things that were never meant to be found." Okay, you offer him a drink. He declines. Instead, he places a thin wooden box on the table and slides it towards you. Inside, fragments of clay, broken edges, faint impressions of what looks like lettering, or at least intentional scratching. He points to one piece. Recognize it? You don't want to admit it, but you kind of do. The pattern matches the decorative band around boss's rim. Same dots, same faint leaf motif. The man nods. "We dug this up near Merv." He says, "We think it's part of a much older jar, maybe even a prototype. Same shape, same design, same lingering smell." You raise an eyebrow. "So this wasn't a one-time mistake?" He chuckles. "Oh no, it was a series of mistakes, possibly a whole year of them." He tells you about recent digs, jars buried beside ancient trade seals, fragments found in ritual pits, even an entire chamber lined with broken vessels and one very alarmed badger. It seems pickling, as a practice, went far beyond just preserving food. Some cultures believed fermentation was a form of spiritual softening, breaking something down to its essence. A metaphor for mortality, or patience, or digestion, depends who you asked. One theory suggests the jars were used in weighing ceremonies. You'd seal something inside lettuce, dreams, grievances, and only open it after a long journey, physical or emotional. Sometimes you never open it at all. You stare at the clay shards and feel something click. Maybe boss was never meant to be used. It was meant to accompany, like a traveling prayer, or a message to the future, or an inside joke only the universe understands. Later, you walk to the library, slip past the dancing assistant, and stand quietly in front of the jar. It's still there, unopened, untouched, radiating the same quiet confusion as always. But now, you see something different. It's not just a jar. It's a relic of emotional logistics, an artifact of intercontinental misunderstanding, a champion of the long game. You reach out and gently tap the lid, just once. Bloop! Still alive. Back outside. The moon is rising over tub rooftops and silent courtyards. You pass a group of students playing music on dusty instruments, one of them singing softly about a jar that knew too much. You smile. The man with the clay fragments finds you again the next morning. He wants your help identifying other jar-similar designs, markings, mysteries. You agree, not because you miss the smell, but because you miss the feeling of carrying something strange, of not knowing and carrying it anyway. By now, You've become something of a jar consultant. You never expected this career twist. When you first set out across the desert months ago, you thought you'd deliver the goods, get your payment, and move on to less odorous cargo. Blankets, maybe, dried figs, literally anything that doesn't gurgle at night. Instead, here you are standing in a museum basement with first colors, a confused goat, and a lineup of jars that all look suspiciously familiar. One is taller, with what appears to be a sculpted beetle pressed into the lid. Another is squat and wide, painted with a faded scene of what might be a lettuce planter, a very confident fern. All of them have that same rounded belly, that same odd stillness. You take one within recall. Yep, family resemblance. The scholars bombard you with questions. Would you say this one smells more or less confrontational than yours? Did boss ever produce a low humming noise when exposed to sunlight? Do you believe pickling was being used to store memories in chemical form? You answer as best you can, which is to say, possibly, only after onions. And honestly, that doesn't even sound far-fetched anymore. The conversation turns to preservation techniques. One scholar insists the jars were made to last not in spite of their contents, but because of them. The fermentation created internal pressure that actually reinforced the ceramic. Another argues that the jars were vessels for symbolic fermentation meant to carry things that shouldn't change quickly. Ideas, customs, lettuce. Meanwhile, modern historians still debate their purpose. A few insist they were field rations. Others believe they were votive offerings. Some even suggest they were trade markers, unique smells, helping identify different merchant routes like a fermented passport. And then there's the accidental relic theory, the idea that many things survive history not because they were revered, but because they were abandoned and no one wanted to deal with them. Pickled lettuce, perfect candidate. You take a break from all the theorizing and step outside. Samarkand is buzzing today, merchants shouting, children racing, pigeons debating loudly in the plaza. You pass a small shop selling clay toys. One shelf is entirely tiny jars, each painted with little faces. One of them looks remarkably smug. You buy it. Back at your lodging, you place it beside the medallion and the worn strap from your old jar pack. A little shrine to the journey. Not religious, not sentimental, just respectful. You make tea, settle by the window, and reflect. You think about all the places the jar passed through, all the hands that carried it before yours, all the confused recipients, the sniffing merchants, the ceremonial bowers, the man who tried to feed it almonds. And you think about the weight of things, not physical weight, story weight. How some objects collected absorb it, become heavier with meaning the longer they last. Maybe that's why the jar never needed an explanation. It just needed time. Later that evening, a letter arrives. It's from the young scholar you met weeks ago. He sent a draft of his dissertation, titled Preservation as Narrative, the Cultural Afterlife of a Misunderstood Vegetable. You grin. You read through it, smiling at the parts where he describes your journey in heroic, overly poetic terms. You, apparently, are now the reluctant guardian of the sour age. You snort tea out your nose. Still, you underline a passage that hits you deep. Perhaps the jar's purpose was never consumption or trade. Perhaps it was simply meant to last so that one day, someone would wonder why. You look at the little toy jar on your shelf, and you wonder. The seasons begin to turn. Samarkand warms. The vines in the gardens thicken. Street musicians play slower songs. The smells shift from spice and smoke to citrus and some warm earth. And you begin to pack? Not because you're running, not because you're lost, but because something in you has begun to stir. And need not for destination, but for emotion. The jar may be resting in its honorable spot, but you still have roads left to walk. Before you leave, you pay one last visit to the library. You find boss exactly where you left it, still sealed, still slightly leaning to the left, like it disapproves of being studied but can't be bothered to object. A new group of travelers stands in front of it. One is sketching, another is sniffing from a respectful distance. A third whispers, "I arranged a marriage once." You say nothing. You don't need to. The librarian sees you and waves. She's updated the plaque again. It now reads, "Artifact 480 to function unknown. Story ongoing." You like that? You spend your final afternoon giving away small things you no longer need. A rolled up mat to a young porter. Your extra shoes to a passing pilgrim. The tiny smug-faced jar you bought. You leave it anonymously on the windowsill of the scholar's dormitory. A parting gift. Let the myth continue. That evening, a small farewell gathering forms around you at the tavern. Merchants you've traveled with. Scribes you've helped translate for. One musician who wrote a surprisingly heartfelt ballad. Tale of the man who smelled like legend. You raise your cup to journeys that make no sense, but leave stories anyway. They cheer, someone toasts a boss, everyone laughs. You leave at dawn, the road greets you like an old, weird friend. You follow a new path now only that dips south into valleys where the stories are softer and the smells less aggressive, but the jar stays with you, in a way, in the questions people asked, in the memory of a journey, defined not by success or failure but by curiosity. You begin to notice other jars, in markets, in temples, on cars trundling past. They're not the same, of course, but you wonder, and that wondering is enough. In a roadside village, a boy asks you what the most valuable thing you ever carried was. You think for a moment. You could say silk, or gold, or even trust, but you smile and say, a jar of something nobody wanted to eat but everyone wanted to understand. He stares at you for a second, then runs off to tell his grandmother. You keep walking. Somewhere out there, the jar is still resting, still confusing, still enduring, just like all good stories. You're weeks into your new route now. It's quieter, here less caravan noise, more bird song. You pass through valleys stitched with terraces and small villages that haven't seen a proper merchant in seasons. People greet you not with coin, but with food, flatbread, berries, goat cheese. You trade what little you carry. You tell stories in return. Always the story of the jar. They ask about it the way people ask about old legends. Was it magical? Did it glow? Did it speak? You tell them the truth, more or less. It smelled like a forgotten argument. You say once. Someone knits their brow. So, wisdom. Sure, why not? In one village, a schoolteacher pulls you aside and asks you to speak to her students. They're learning about history, she says, but they don't feel it yet. You sit cross-legged in a shaded classroom, the children staring up at you, wide-eyed. You begin the story not with dates or place but with questions. What would you do? You asked. If someone handed you a jar, said nothing, and told you to carry it for months across rivers, deserts, and mountains, they giggle. Some say they throw it away. Others say they open it right away. You nod. I thought all those things too. You tell them about the sandstorms, the confused monks, the men who bowed to it. You talk about being frustrated, about not knowing why you were doing what you were doing but doing it anyway. You end with this. Sometimes history isn't about understanding everything. It's about carrying something long enough to begin to understand. The room is quiet. Then a boy raises his hand and asks, was it ever good? You pause. No. You say gently, but it was true. He thinks for a long time, then nods. Later that evening, you walk past the village's little market and spot something on a table. A jar, plain, empty, but wrapped in a strip of red cloth and painted with a tiny fern. The vendor sees your expression. It's a replica. He says, from that story you told, kids won't stop asking for them. You buy one. You don't need it, but you know what to do with it. That night, you place it near the fire, beside your rolled-up mat. The wind rustles the trees, the stars blink down like slow, sleepy questions. You stare at the jar. Not boss, just another chapter. You've carried many things, traded many things, but this became a part of you. The journey, the uncertainty, The absurdity all of it fermented into something strangely beautiful, something you never quite explain and never need to, because now someone else will carry it too. Not the jar itself, the story. You lie back on your mat, arms behind your head, breath soft. The fire crackles beside you. A breeze rolls through the leaves. You smile into the dark. The fire has burned low now. You feel it more than see it, faint warmth against your feet, the steady glow behind your eyelids. Your body is still, but your mind hums quietly, like a caravan at rest. Saddles loosened, maps folded, jar sealed. The road behind you is long and weird and full of vinegar, but somehow it all makes sense now. You didn't need to understand the jar to carry it. You didn't need a destination to make the journey worth something. And you didn't need answers to feel changed. So many things in life are like that, aren't they? We carry odd duties, strange moments, confusing emotions sometimes without labels, without clarity, without knowing if they're worth anything, but they are because we choose to carry them, and that choice becomes the meaning. Maybe you've been carrying something too, a memory, a worry, a hope that hasn't quite unfolded yet. That's okay. You can set it down now. For tonight, at least, the wind has settled, the stories are quiet, even that imaginary lettuce has stopped gurgling. Let your breath slow, let your jaw unclench. Let the night be just a night. Let the past be soft, like parchment warmed by the sun. You did well today, truly, and now, it's time to rest.